Welcome to the Educational Physics Podcast. I am your host, João Figueiredo. This podcast is all about education, pedagogy, mindset, and really any other nonsense that I think about during the week. Enjoy. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing, reviewing, or even sharing with your friends. Welcome to another episode of the Educational Physics Podcast. Today I want to talk about two things which are quite fundamental when it comes to education or just being a human being. One is tolerance, and the other one is nuance. The reason why I want to discuss these two ideas, and I will do my very best to be as nuanced and tolerant as possible, is precisely because it is very easy to lose sight of what nuance exists within a specific topic, especially if it is quite controversial. And then we start taking intellectual leaps and fulfilling certain biases that we don't necessarily think through. Let me start with a story. I was having this discussion on social media on the state of the educational system. And this person with whom I was discussing or debating, or at some point even became a bit of arguing, had what I would say a valid premise. This person said that the educational system is broken. And I don't disagree with that. But then, because he's got certain tendencies of thinking more conspiratorially, that's not a word, in more conspiratory ways, he kind of took this intellectual leap and landed on this very sort of evil master plan as to why the educational system is broken. Now, this is where nuance is important. Let me give you first why I think the educational system is broken. So there's several things here that I would like to unpack. Number one, the educational system is broken precisely because it's designed, at least it is the case in the UK and in many, many different other countries around the world. It's designed to first identify gaps in the marketplace when it comes to skill sets, and then it trains the next generation of workers within that field. So if we realize that our workforce doesn't have enough engineers, that's going to be the focus of the curriculum for decades to come. Now, that's a broken system, if you ask me, because it deprives children, in this case, from exploring their own passions and potentials, and instead they keep getting funneled down into this career and path that's been sort of predefined for them because of the needs of the market. Now, do I think that that's because there's an evil plan that we're trying to brainwash everyone ideologically? No, but I'll get to that. That's not necessarily what's behind these issues. It's economy, it's money, which is a problem. Don't get me wrong, but is it some sort of Illuminati cabal and this global conspiracy to implant chips into people? No, not in my opinion, and I kind of hope I'm right. Sure, I'll look at the evidence if it ever comes up, but realistically, I'm going to say no. However, there is also an element of ideology, especially in the last 20 years, that's become more and more of a problem. Education is trying to, or educators even, are trying to reinforce and instill certain ideas into students that are not necessarily, how do I put it? They're not necessarily conducive to open mind, free thinking, free speech, and other ideas alike. Ideas that I subscribe to, as you might know by now. I believe that it is very important that we concentrate on understanding the nuance of these ideas. So I say, yes, of course, the educational system is broken. Yes. But then, if we don't understand how it's broken, how are we supposed to fix it if we are to try, as we should? In my opinion, to go on social media and rant about, lizard people, I'm not sure how that's going to fix anything. If anything, it brings more toxicity into the conversation. And one of the things that I said to this person is that the way you're delivering the message is corrupting the message. And as it goes in these sorts of debates, the reaction was that the delivery shouldn't matter. The content should matter. Now, I'm an educator, and so I could not disagree with that more. Right? I do believe that the delivery matters, that the way we express these ideas matters. The the passion matters, the lack of aggression. If I come at you just shouting and insulting you, how receptive will you be of my message? So it doesn't really matter if my message is good or not. If I come at you hard, violently, almost insulting you, and one of the things that was said during that conversation was that the delivery of the message doesn't matter, and if it's not received properly, it's because the recipient is basically cognitively challenged. I think that's pretty much the wording that was used, which is unfortunately a lot of what's being done nowadays on social media. People just shout at each other, and then when you don't get it, it's on you. As someone who tries to be a communicator of good ideas, and I'm not saying that I always do it well or not that all my ideas are good, but I try. I really take issue with this sort of communication and the lack of nuance and the lack of kindness, the lack of empathy. Look, if I'm trying to express an idea and you don't get it, that's on me. And sure, maybe I'm going to communicate the idea the best I can. But at the end of the day, if you still don't get it, that is on me. Your bias is always in the mix. My bias is also in the mix. So these things require a lot of care and tender energy. And I'm not the best at that. I fail all the time. I fail as a teacher at that. I fail as a parent, as a friend, as a human. But I try. I constantly keep trying to improve that skill, to work on my ability to communicate ideas without the aggression, without, that need to win. And that is really the bottom line here. Is that who wins when I come into a conversation wanting to win? Because I'm not going to be well received, which means that I don't win. You see, there's a paradox there, because if you're being ego driven in these sorts of discussions, trust me, no one's going to win. You won't win because you can't win like that. and the other person won't win because, like, who likes to have a conversation when someone is just shouting at you or something like that? And tied to this, there's this idea, also present in education, by the way, of tolerance and unconditional acceptance, which I have to say, I don't agree with. I don't believe, first of all, that humans are wired and not even supposed to do that. We make judgment calls. We make judgment calls of those who we deem to be intolerant. That's a judgment call. So to consider yourself judgment free or completely non judgmental is actually, uh, again, it's another paradox. And this is the thing. We find so many of these situations in our current way of communicating. So, another example, I was having yet another interaction, which I perhaps should stop doing. Um, and there was this post on Facebook that was considered to be sexist. And it wasn't just by me that was considered to be sexist, but I do agree that it was sexist. And then, for context, this post was from someone based in a country in the Middle East. Now, I'm not gonna trash on the Middle East. I'm not gonna go into some sort of like anti Middle East rant. That's not the point. In fact, as I reflect on this story that I will share with you, it bothered me more some reactions of people who are not in the Middle East than the person who posted the original post in the first place, who is based in the Middle East. Okay, so this is my own reflection on how I reacted to it. The reactions to the post bother me more. So here's why. The post was deemed to be sexist by some, including myself. I pointed out that, unfortunately, this is a systematic problem, perhaps a systemic problem of the Middle East. Let's not play around here or beat around the bush, right? There are issues when it comes to their relationship with women. There are issues when it comes to their relationship with women in the workplace. These are issues that are real, okay? And one faction of these people commenting on that post were making this argument against my position that it was sexist by saying that these are just different cultures, and the fact that we were calling it sexist showed our prejudice against the culture. Now, this is very problematic. So this is what I call unconditional tolerance. And the issue is with this is that we then become tolerant towards intolerance. So we are looking at and now I'm using this in quotes, culture that is intolerant towards a specific sample of the population. In this case, let's go with women, but it could be homosexuals, for example. And then we claim that it is a sign of intolerance to criticize that. Now, this is really troubling, because if we lose the ability to see the nuance and the differences between being xenophobic because you don't tolerate people who are different to you and to your kind, so to speak, and then on the flip side, casting judgment. Yes, that's exactly what I was doing, but casting judgment on the basis of another say person or persons being prejudiced towards people who are different to them, right? So if you criticize xenophobic people from a different country than yours, then are you being xenophobic? You see where this goes, right? It's extremely um, harming to the movement of tolerance, if you will, the humanistic movement, right? To become unconditionally tolerant. Because we have to remain intolerant towards intolerance. And I know that sounds like I'm just playing with words here, but this is the reality. We have to be able to understand where judgment must be cast. Now, I understand it can go too far, which is why nuance is so important. We can't be taking intellectual leaps. We have to be able to reason with people, understand where they're coming from. In the communication, we must stay empathetic, but we must make a point. We must be able to make an argument for progress. And if we keep doing this thing where we tolerate intolerance because we don't want to be at all costs, we don't want to be judgmental, then progress and the progressive movement in general will end up eating its own tail. It won't be able to do the thing that it defends because it refuses to do that thing. Because by definition, progressive people cannot be judgmental, according to this idea, which is not mine. No, we must stay judgmental. Because imagine this, and I know this is a silly example. I understand it's an exaggeration, but at the same time, is it? Or do we just see it as an exaggeration because it's in the past and we can no longer relate to it? So if I'm saying, one of the things that was said to me during this discussion was, well, if you don't like that culture, just don't go there. Right. But also no. Because who says that I'm just thinking of myself? Why should I only think of myself? Why should I only criticize those who or criticize those who surround me, so to speak, or who could potentially affect me? No, I should be able to criticize those who might be or rather, sorry, I should be able to criticize those who might affect people who have nothing to do with me. But as a fellow human, I feel for them, and therefore I will, make a point or judge it. Imagine this. Imagine if someone had said in the 1930s that if you don't like being a Nazi, or if you don't like Nazis, just don't come to Germany then. This is it's a reduction ad absurdum, but it is absurd, let's be fair, to make a claim that you can't criticize oppressive ideas because that would be oppressive. This is the progressive movement eating its own tail. And we have to call this out because it's harming the progressive movement, which I appreciate. I appreciate progress. I'm a fan of technology. I'm a fan of ideas. I'm a fan of free speech. I'm a fan of groundbreaking ideas that challenge the status quo and the zeitgeist. Let's go. We have to go down there. We have to go down those dangerous roads. But not like this, because we can't circle around the idea of judgment and and call it progressive thinking. It's not progressive thinking. It's empty, pointless virtue signaling that only enables those who are committing these oppressive actions. So one of the things that I want to start discussing on this podcast as well is like, okay, how do we combine healthily empathy and judgment. How do we cast judgment onto oppressive ideas while staying empathetic even towards those who oppress? And at the end of the day, this is a philosophical question, but should we be empathize with those who oppress, or should we just save that empathy for those who are oppressed? I feel that we should deploy empathy to all, and that is the way to really untangle a lot of these issues. I feel. I believe that without doing that, it will be extremely difficult to, yeah, to have progress. So, how does this all go back to education? As educators, we play a role in this. Should we be more political in our classes, in our teaching? Should we be discussing more social issues? Or should we just like follow the curriculum and stick to what we're doing? I have a very particular style of teaching where when I branch off and I go outside the field, I tend to pick topics for discussion that are, in a way, atopical. So I prefer to think about things philosophically and discuss them with my students that way. So I don't really tell them what to think, but more how to think, how to look at reality, how to understand perception, bias, becoming more of an analytical thinker, critical thinker. I don't necessarily care about how, or rather, what you think. If you're someone who's capable of maintaining a critical mindset, including a self critical mindset, where you constantly reason with yourself and understand yourself through those mechanisms. It takes a long time to develop quote unquote self awareness. And self awareness, even that, is a very fleeting thing. You don't achieve self awareness, you practice it daily. And that self awareness will lead to then understanding, "Yeah, I can't be right all the time. That's just not possible. Of course, I have a bias. It's unavoidable." And when you start to accept these ideas, that first of all, you can't be right, nor you can't be wrong all the time. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And you understand that, yes, you have a bias, and your perception plays a role when it comes to the way you analyze things, because you cannot possibly see everything around you. This is what I call samplifying information, which is obviously extracting just enough information for you to gather data that will give you an answer for the questions that are arising in that moment, instead of extracting all the data that is available to you at any given moment, which would only overwhelm you, and you will get to no answers. But you have to know that you're doing that whenever you're looking at an issue, you're not extracting all the available data, but rather extracting the necessary data. Now, when you understand that, you also understand that that leaves you with blind spots. And when you understand that, you then understand that you have to listen. You have to listen to the other side. You have to understand that the other side will bring into the conversation their bias, which will show you different angles. And then you'll understand that the way your opposition sees an issue will reveal your blind spots. And hopefully, the way you see the issue will reveal their blind spots. And we can come together in the middle by filling in those gaps through meaningful conversation. So many times in my life, I've changed my mind. I've adapted, I've adjusted, I've made so many mistakes. And I look back and I see them as mistakes. I don't try to rationalize my way out of I don't try to rationalize my way out of a mistake. Even if my ego wants me to, I know this trick by now. So I know how to fight it. I know how to stop it. I know how to sit down with my thoughts and clean up the landscape, so to speak, and go through that, play in my head and listen to all the characters and listen to the people, in real life who bring information that I just didn't see. And if you want to have any superpower, let it be the ability to listen and to understand that what someone might say to you might be worth listening to. So stay nuanced, stay tolerant, but willing to judge, especially when at the end of that judgment lies someone who's oppressive or intolerant or violent. Because if we don't judge those, and by using that judgment, even giving them a chance to see their own mistakes, we're just enabling this, and the cycle of oppression and intolerance and aggression and violence will just continue because we're trying to be unconditionally tolerant. So let this be your takeaway from today's podcast. In the meantime, think about yourself critically. Don't tarnish your own self-esteem with it. Critically is not necessarily a destructive idea. So I would say stay nuanced, stay attentive to other people's opinions, and open your mind to better communication. Thank you for listening and watching. Please subscribe, share, comment if you can, if you're on a platform that allows for that. And I will see you guys next week.